Minnesota celebrated its centennial summer in 1949. That was not the only major event of that year. This is the story of one of the major events that happened and the history that has happened since. A shy young farm boy got a job delivering soft drinks throughout southern Minnesota, and one of the stops was Dorsky's Cafe in the little town of Alpha in Jackson County. In June of 1949, a pretty young Alpha girl started working in Dorsky's Cafe, and this shy young truck driver really took a fancy to her. Every Monday, the young truck driver would look forward to visiting Dorsky's Cafe and seeing this pretty blonde. There must have been some mutual attraction on her part too, because she would always hold the door open for him as he would bring in cartloads of soda pop, and she would sit with him when he ate his hamburger. But all good things sometimes come to an end, and summer ended, and this pretty blonde went off to Mankato Teachers College. With a heavy heart, the young truck driver went about his business, delivering the soda pop, but always wondering what could have been if they could have ever dated. The young truck driver roomed at this house in 317 South Prairie, shown on the left, and as he tripped up the steps to go in one night in October, there was a letter on the banister from this pretty blonde co-ed saying that she would be home for the weekend and that he could see her if he wanted to. So young John put a couple of quarts of oil in his old 1940 Plymouth, 5 gallons of gas, and headed to Alpha. He picked up this young blonde Virginia, and his heart was racing with anticipation that he was lucky enough to be able to date her. Now Virginia lived with a very stern grandmother, Sophie Hageman, pictured here, who looked this young truck driver up and down and had some apprehension about her granddaughter dating him, but nonetheless they went and saw a movie in Jackson. Their first date was the movie at the old State Theater in Jackson, and to this date the storyteller couldn't tell you what the movie was, because the thing foremost on his mind was that beauty sitting by his side. About halfway through the movie, this shy young truck driver boldly reached over and touched her hand, and when she didn't pull it away, he thought he really had struck gold. So then dating commenced. Every weekend, either Virginia would come home or John would fire up his old 1940 Plymouth and go to Mankato. Oh, those were golden days. Now this beauty knew how to toy with the truck driver's emotions by flirting with him. Here we see her peeking coyly from behind the steering wheel on his old Plymouth. And then she would give him those Google eyes that just melted his heart. This flirting encouraged young John to be more bold than hand-holding. The next thing you know, he was kissing this beauty. Wow! As the love grew stronger, we were mindful of the Apostle Paul's admonition to the Corinthians from 1 Corinthians 7, verse 8. And he said, I quote, "Now to the unmarried and to the widows I say, it is good for them to stay unmarried, as I do. But if they cannot control themselves, they should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion." Now, I don't know if there's a thermometer that would measure the heat from burning with passion, but in any event, we wanted to, and we did get married. So on June 23rd, 1950, the love-struck young couple stood in front of their family and friends at the Presbyterian Church in Alpha and recited their vows, which have remained unbroken for 65 years. 2 days later, a major international event cast a shadow over the happiness of this occasion.
At 4 a.m. on June 25, 1950, the armies of North Korea stormed across the 38th parallel, hoping to crush the South in one overwhelming offensive. 135,000 communists besieged a ragtag South Korean border patrol and steamrolled southward.
For a newly married couple, this was a scary event 2 days after our wedding. But as the picture shows, married men were deferred, and so it was time to start a family. And start we did, and kept it up for several years. Our first home as young newlyweds was this little cottage in Fox Lake, Minnesota. This garage was not located here when we rented the house, and this lawn was a stone grotto with all manner of sculptures created by the former owner. In the fall of 1950, the bottling company asked me to open a warehouse in Slayton, Minnesota, and sell soft drinks in that region. We rented a small 2-room apartment in the south side of Slayton, and then later rented the upstairs in this building from Bob and Marianne and Steffes. While living in the Steffes apartment, our firstborn, John T. Sweeney, was born here in the Murray County Hospital on April 22nd, 1951. Now, any reader that is gossipy by nature can read the calculation above. In the fall of 1951, the little family of 3 moved to Pipestone, Minnesota, where they rented an upstairs apartment in this building shown. Now, the patriarch of this little family of 3 started his Pipestone career as a driver salesman for Panna Gold Baking Company, who subsequently changed the name of their product to Sunbeam Bread. Doesn't he look sharp with that uniform and the tie? After a few months freezing in the poorly heated upstairs apartment, the family rented the upstairs of this house from the family of Everett Nave. Within a year or so, they found this little house for rent with 2 bedrooms, and it was while living here that on August 14th, 1952, our second child, Genevieve Esther, was born. One of 3 children born in the Pipestone Hospital. This hospital was right across the street from the new home we built in 1953. And when our third child, Thomas Paul, was born in December of 1954, John and Jenny could stand in the picture window and look out and see her mother coming out of the hospital with a new baby, and they jumped up and down with glee to see their new baby brother. Here is a satellite view of the current Pipestone Medical Center. As you can see, it has expanded rapidly in the 60 years hence. Note the red box to the left, which is the house that we built. Virginia's grandmother Verdict died July 11th, 1953, and Virginia inherited $6,500 from the estate for her father's share. Here you see John and Jenny playing in front of this house that was built for $13,500. This was like a marriage dowry, which paid for almost half the value of the house. That John really knew how to pick 'em, didn't he? Not only did he marry a beauty, but a well-propertied woman as well. In December of 1956, while still living in this house, our fourth child, Melanie Joy, was born. Having so many kids, it was convenient living right across from the hospital. With all of the kids born in Pipestone, maybe it was time to move out before any more were born. So in late 1956, John went to work for New Holland Machine Company out of the Minneapolis branch. Brother Ben had worked for New Holland for about 3 years before this, so that was the introduction. The first few months, John worked as a trainee out of the branch in Minneapolis and then was transferred to Iowa, where they rented this little house at 301 West Jackson Street in Fairfield, Iowa. Now with a family of 4 kids to support, it was important that he get busy and earn some commissions in this new sales job. Now, while this was a nice little house, Virginia was reluctant to leave her beautiful new house in Pipestone, which was purchased with half of the funds coming from her dowry. But John, being the consummate salesman, convinced her that if they moved to Iowa, it was much further south, a milder climate, and we would earn commissions and have a lot of money. Trusting in her beloved husband, Virginia was nearly ready to pack up the children's winter clothes and give them to Goodwill, since we'd be living in such a mild climate. Within 2 weeks, John got his first paycheck of $18, which did not exactly look like massive earnings, and the storm of the century hit all over the Plains states from Iowa through Texas.
Deep in some places, hundreds of cars were marooned during the height of the storm, and an estimated 38 persons perished. Kansas was among the hardest hit of the 5 states. In the western portion, a cracked transcontinental train is completely buried.
She hasn't believed a word that man has said in the last 60 years. You just can't trust him. So here was the little family of 4 children while living in Fairfield in 1957 and 58, all dressed up for church. The kids had lots of little friends in the neighborhood and were able to play outside in this tropic Iowa climate. The main reason this territory was open to give John an opportunity was that the prior representative was literally starving to death because of a 3-year drought in southern Iowa and low hog prices. This was an area of large livestock feeding operations, and so hog prices and crops were very important. Dealers had a lot of unsold new machines, so it was difficult to write any new business. Call it the luck of the Irish, or just plain dumb luck, but the spring of 1957, good rains came back again and hog prices increased, and there was increased spending and sharp increase in sales. That fall, John was reassigned to a much better farming territory in eastern Iowa, and the family moved to Clinton. During this transition, John would be gone all week on the new territory and come home to Fairfield on the weekend, whereupon the kids would pile on him and, "What did you bring me, Daddy?" And here is the beautiful new brick home we had. Oh my, we were proud of this. The next few scenes show some of the events of our life in Clinton, Iowa. John and Tom peeking out from the new bathroom with all the fancy ceramic tile, the lap of luxury. And Virginia would make popsicles in plastic containers from Kool-Aid, and Tom found his way into the freezer to get one. Here is Virginia, Jenny, and Melanie in their hats and dresses that Virginia made for them, all dressed up for Easter Sunday. In 1958 or 59, Aunt Lydia came to Clinton to visit and see her favorite great-nieces and nephews. And one of our recreational outings, John T. got to drive this tractor, and Tom P. experienced one of his first of many medical emergencies when he was hit in the nose with a garden hose nozzle. The family hired a private plane to take us from Clinton to Mason City, Iowa for a family reunion. Pictured here is John's uncle Barrett Meyer, John G. Sweeney, Virginia, John, and Jenny. John T. is co-pilot. You'll just see his ear in the right front seat, and Jenny in the airplane ride to Mason City. Jenny is a Brownie Scout and John is a Cub Scout in front of the Clinton house. In 1961, New Holland reorganized the territory and the family moved to the town of Tipton and purchased this old Dutch colonial house to be a little closer to the center of the territory. We see a yard full of bikes, and in the driveway was Virginia's little Nash Rambler. This house had a vacant lot on the west side where the kids played touch football and other games. Shortly after the family purchased this old Dutch colonial house, they started renovating it, and here you see the old kitchen. And the next scene is the new cupboards and the new double-deck stove and the eating area. John was smoking at the time, and here during the remodeling process he could light a cigarette with his blowtorch. In February of 1962, while he was down sick for 3 weeks with the flu, he quit smoking and never started again. In 1962, John's former division manager, Clayton Obermeyer, went to work for Industrial Credit, located in the Ham Building in St. Paul. A few months thereafter, he recruited John to work for the company, and after training in St. Paul for a few months, the family moved to Houston with the intent of opening a commercial finance office in the city. The family moved into an apartment building in Springfield, Texas, on the north end of Houston. The kids loved the swimming pool, but we knew we had been in Texas too long when Virginia tried to get the kids down for an afternoon nap, to which they exclaimed, "But Mom, we was just fixin' to go swimming." By August of 1963, it became apparent that the company could not use the name Industrial Credit for an operation in Houston because it was already registered to another company. So the family was transferred to the Los Angeles area, where they rented this little house at 2543 Norma in West Covina. While living in West Covina, the family started attending this church in Pomona, and they learned of a house at 1481 Elmcroft in Pomona for rent with an option to buy. Here is the house as it appeared in 1964. In the 7 years we lived in Pomona, there were a number of major events took place. The house, when we purchased it, had a garage around behind the house, which we converted into an extra room and built the carport that you see in the left of the picture. The two Johns here, like sidewalk superintendents, were watching the laying of the slab for the carport. In order to get a building permit, the family had to agree to plant 2 trees in the boulevard, which were about 6 foot high at the time. This recent Google Street View shows those trees today. One of the benefits of living here for the kids is the neighbors next door had a swimming pool. John Jr. standing on the diving board with a football. Now don't tell me he's going to jump into that pool with his street clothes on. Tom in Cub Scouts and Melanie in Bluebirds. In the 60s, not only did the family grow, but so did John's hair, as indicated. Here's what he looked like before, and this is what he looked like after getting the hair. So he lost weight and gained hair in this pic. In the next family picture, the hair is gone. So hair is like seasons, it comes and goes. Both John and Jenny graduated from high school when we lived in Pomona. Virginia looks like she might have put on a little weight in this picture. And in 1970, at Jenny's graduation, she was slim and trim again. And that was a result of another event, the birth of Sean Michael Sweeney in 1969. 3 October birthdays, from left to right, John R., Sean Michael, and John G. Sweeney. Now it's hard to remember whether the other 4 children were more excited about having a new baby brother or seeing their mother's baby shower gift, the shiny red Mustang. On the subject of cars, John and Jenny got their first ones. John a red Volkswagen and Jenny a white Toyota while we lived here. Another episode in the continuing saga of Tom's emergency medical conditions. Here he fell off his bike and broke his glasses and scuffed up his face, and at that same period he was riding the motorbike and burned his leg bad on the muffler. Christmas in Pomona was always a great time. The family would dress up, go to church on Christmas Eve, come home and have chili, and then open presents. Except Melanie and Jenny thought it would be timely to have a few minutes of sing-along for Christmas Eve. The boys were disgusted. They wanted to get at the gifts. With Ben and Arta's family living in Fresno and our family in Pomona, there were several times when the families got together for holidays, and here's 8 cousins before Sean was born. The 2 California families vacationed in Ensenada, Mexico in the mid to late 1960s. They had rented casitas right on the beach, and the boys all went out deep sea fishing, and here shows that they had pretty good luck. Tom loved fishing, and one of John's customers had an ocean-going rig, and he took the family out for fishing. Virginia insisted all of the kids take Dramamine, but Tom refused to take it, and subsequently got seasick. So while the rest of the family was enjoying catching great fish, Tom laid in the bunk very sick. As soon as the boat docked, Tom was up on deck with his regular smile, holding the fish with pride, even though he didn't have the pleasure of catching one. John's lack of a high school diploma and a background of truck driver experience, he quickly found that he had been promoted to his level of incompetence, as noted in the Peter Principle. Figuring that it was time to get some book larnin' in order to keep his job, John enrolled in Mount San Antonio Junior College, where he took courses in finance and business management. After completing all of the courses that he could in Mount Sac, John enrolled in Cal State LA, where he could take more advanced courses. As these studies may have been helpful in John's career, it was a hardship for the family because he went to school 2 nights a week and spent the whole weekend holed up in the den studying. The family was mostly fatherless. In 1968, his employer, Industrial Credit, offered him the opportunity to attend a 3-year course at Stanford University in the Graduate School of Credit and Financial Management, where he was on campus 2 weeks each summer and then had coursework the year around. Now, John's report card from 1945, pictured here, indicates that he might not have been the sharpest tool in the shed. But let it be known that when a student has 4 kids to feed and another one on the way, he might be a little more motivated than he was in high school. Here is the transcript from Cal State LA showing a 4.0 GPA. At the completion of the 3-year coursework at the Graduate School of Credit and Financial Management at Stanford, the letter from Peter Peasley, director, indicates that John had earned the prestigious Alumni Award. During the 3-year period of the studies in Stanford, Industrial Credit was acquired by ITT, the conglomerate in New York, and John was promoted to Vice President Division Manager at the home office in St. Paul. It seems they wanted to see if they could promote him again to another level of incompetence. In August of 1970, Sean, Melanie, Tom, and their mother and father moved to St. Paul in this rented house off McKnight, while John and Jenny stayed in California in college. In the spring of 1971, the family purchased this split-level home in White Bear Lake, and John and Jenny came home from their college in California to rejoin the family. As John was researching St. Cloud State as a possible place to complete his junior year, he met the neighbor girl, Christine Farkell, who also studied at St. Cloud. Soon they became an item and were seeing a lot of each other and dated during their junior year of 1971. In September of 1972, these 2 neighbor kids, students of St. Cloud State, were married. They apparently listened to the vows carefully because they have been married for 43 years at this writing. John and Jenny graduated from Pomona High School, but in the 1970s, Tom graduated from White Bear High and Melanie from Mariner High School. Jenny returned to school in Minnesota studying cosmetology, while at the same time leading a teenage girl's Sunday school class. One of her Sunday school students had a cousin recently out of the Navy studying to be an electrician. After the proper introduction, the two of them started dating, and it wasn't long thereafter that this young cosmetologist and the electrician were wed. And 2 years later, Tom and Julie Olson were married. So now we had 3 kids married. Not another medical emergency for Tom. Here he froze his ears while playing hockey on White Bear Lake, and they swelled up as big as watermelons. Sean was fascinated with electricity and garden hoses and all manner of things. Here he was delighted as Tom gave him a trouble light for Christmas. In 1973, the St. Paul companies, which were located right across the street from the Ham building where John worked, were using a West Coast recruiter to find a vice president of operations for their newly formed equipment leasing division. And so John left ITT to assume that post. In the period from 1973 to 1975, the equities market took a tank, and the St. Paul companies lost $200 million in investments. And since the parent company was guaranteeing the debt for the leasing company, the regulators insisted that they get rid of this debt. So St. Paul had to close the leasing company, and John was out in his ear after 2 years. This was a scary time for a 45-year-old father with 2 kids in college. However, it turned out to be very favorable. The St. Paul companies were very generous with their severance, and John was hired immediately by the Space Center companies when they learned he was available. They needed someone to head up a leasing initiative. So maybe again it was the luck of the Irish. With the 4 older kids either married or off to college, our family had shrunk to 3. And so John, Virginia, and Sean did a lot of camping with this pop-top camper. Next, they got into sailing with the 12-foot Mayflower on the left, and then subsequently the 18-foot Chrysler pictured on the right, and that malady known as the next boat syndrome was manifest in purchasing the 4th boat in a short period of time, culminating with this 27-foot Catalina. Now I'm sure that Sean's behavior sometimes would try his parents' patience to the point where they'd want to cut him adrift, but really we wouldn't have done that. While we were living in White Bear Lake, 5 of our grandchildren were born. Lisa in 1975, Andy in 1976, Sarah in 1977, and Jeff and Ryan in 1978. In the mid-70s, the Space Center companies acquired an abandoned Ford Motor assembly plant pictured in this satellite view in East Dallas with 1,800,000 square feet of decaying buildings. Their objective was to find one tenant that would occupy the complete facility. After 2 years with little success and a lot of decaying buildings and high operating expenses, the company asked John to move to Dallas and try to make this into an industrial park. The business section of the Sunday edition of the Dallas Morning News featured current commercial real estate transactions in the past period. After a few weeks, it was apparent to John that there weren't many 1 million square foot transactions. So he went to the library microfiche and researched 3 years of Sunday editions and found there was very few large transactions. Most of them were 100,000 square feet or less. So it became rather obvious why in 3 years' time they hadn't found that massive single tenant. So with a rather gutsy move, John wrote a business plan suggesting to the owners of the property that they invest the money to subdivide it and make the units a rentable size. He had paid $3.5 million for the property, and we invested another nearly $3 million in it, but got it full of tenants, and it was subsequently sold for $9 million. The family purchased this beautiful brick rambler at 9 Pebble Brook Circle in Richardson, Texas, complete with a swimming pool. That was a grand lifestyle, particularly for Sean, who loved to swim. During our 3 years in Richardson, all of our children and their children visited us, and they frolicked in our pool. Here is Lisa splashing around, Sarah hanging on to her daddy, Sean showing his swimming expertise, and even the grandmother cut a good figure in the pool. In December of 1980, Virginia flew to Minneapolis to be with Jenny upon the birth of Betsy. That visit changed things because on return back to Texas, Virginia pleaded to move back to Minnesota to watch those grandchildren grow up. With this massive property virtually leased up, John made an appeal to transfer back to St. Paul. The company offered him the job of Vice President of Development for the corporation. Meanwhile, John stayed on in Dallas a few months till a successor was found. In the meantime, the family acquired this property east of Hugo with a swimming pool, which pleased Sean. Also, the grandkids seemed to enjoy it, as you see here. The house sat on 5 acres of property. In the fall of 1981, Kelly Alida Ann Sweeney, our 7th grandchild, was born. As John was winding up his affairs in Dallas and preparing to start his new job in St. Paul, he learned that an implement dealership in Cambridge, Minnesota was for sale, and always having an entrepreneurial itch, he was compelled to investigate it. In December of 1981, Tom and Jenny Swanner and John and Virginia pooled their resources and purchased the Kruger and Stake implement business and changed the name to Isanti County Equipment. Tom Swanner and John commuted from White Bear Lake and Hugo respectively for several months before the Sweeneys bought this house at 602 Sunset Lane in Cambridge. In the 22 years that the family spent in Cambridge, there were a number of notable events, some good and some not so good. Commodities and livestock prices were dropping dramatically. Notwithstanding the falling prices, for the first 4 years our sales increased as we gained market share. Then in 1986, the perfect storm hit. Things couldn't have gotten any worse, and all of these events came together in the storm.
Oh my God. Where are you?
Tail of the banks, kicking up something wicked here.
Like the movie, this combination of events and conditions made for a economic perfect storm that had an impact on the dealership. For 2 years we used so much red ink that when we finally got profitable again, the black ink had all dried up in the bottle. After the economic storm subsided, by the early 1990s, the store was starting to turn a profit and things looked less disastrous. During those 22 years the family lived in Cambridge, several other events occurred. Melanie's wedding in 1982, a family reunion with the Verdict clan, and a lot of our family was together in the hotel in Jackson. Here they're all soaking in the pool. In 1988, our 8th grandchild, Lauren Alexandria Hansen, was born. In 1984, the family bought its first Macintosh computer, and that sparked Sean's interest in information services. In 1995, the empty nesters, John and Virginia, sold their Sunset Lane home and bought this townhouse on Cypress Street in Cambridge. In 1998, after renting for 2 or 3 years in Mesa, Arizona, the family bought this park model where we spent several years. In 2003, Melanie and Patrick were married in Toronto, and the whole family attended. In 2004, as John was rounding up to 75 years of age, Virginia allowed as how he'd ought to quit working, and she would like to live in the Twin Cities to be nearer the kids. So we bought into Applewood Point of Roseville Cooperative, where we live at the time of this writing. In the last 40 of our 65-year marriage, we have traveled around the world and seen a lot of exciting places and things. Mexico in 1976 and 1983, Hawaii 4 times, 1982, 86, 89, and 2006, Japan 1985, Alaskan cruise 1991, Ireland 1993 and 1995, Caribbean cruise 1994, Italy 1996, Israel 1998, River Cruise Europe 2005, Australia 2006, Maritime Provinces 2006, Netherlands Belgium 2007, New England Tour 2007, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark 2008, Greece and the Greek Islands 2008, Spain and Scotland 2010, Malta 2011, 2012, and in Germany, Czech Republic, Switzerland, and Austria in 2012. It's time to stay home and grow old gracefully. Stop this vagabond. A lot of water has gone under the bridge in 65 years. 5 kids, 8 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, 20 house and apartment dwellings, 31 cars used, 4 sailboats, and 9 computers. The family tree really grew over the past 65 years. Started with John and Virginia at the roots. In April of 1951, John T. Sweeney was born. In August of 1952, Genevieve Esther was born. In December of 1954, Thomas Paul was born. In December of 1956, Melanie Joy was born. And the tree didn't bear any more fruit for 13 years. Then Sean Sweeney was born. So this completed the first crop on the Sweeney family tree. 6 years after the last growth of the first crop, Lisa Sweeney was born in 1975. Andy Swanner was born in 1976. Sarah Sweeney was born in 1977. Ryan Sweeney was born in 1978, and his cousin Jeffrey Swanner was also born in 1978. And Betsy Swanner was born in 1980. Kelly Sweeney was born in 1981. And Lauren Hanson was born in 1988, and that completed the second ring of growth, the grandchildren. But at last count, the tree is still growing with now a third ring of great-grandchildren. Ethan Kalstorff was born in 2004. Jack Kalstorff was born in 2006. Sienna Kate Revering was born in 2007. Mason Revering was born in 2009. And Ginger Smith was born in 2014. And the last growth on this 65-year-old tree at this writing, it was Nora Nelson in 2015. The tree looks full, but I guess if needed, more branches could sprout out. What a great blessing we have enjoyed over these 65 years. It has been quite a voyage, and let's finish this with a beautiful ballad by Tony Kenny called The Voyage.
I am a sailor and you're my first mate. We signed on together, we coupled our fate. We hauled up our anchor, determined not to fail. For the heart's treasure, together we set sail. With no maps to guide us, we steered our own course. We rode out the storms when the winds were gale force. We sat out the doldrums in patience and in hope, working together we learned how to cope. Life is an ocean, love is a boat. In troubled waters it keeps us afloat. When we started the voyage, there was just me and you. Now gathered round us, we have our own crew. Together we're in this relationship. We built it with care to last the whole trip. Our true destination's not marked on any chart.